We're now going to talk about contract jobs and what contract jobs are. So we need to ask some questions. We need to ask, what is a contract job? We need to ask, why would we be using a contract job? And give some real world example of what a contract job really is. So what a contract job is a job that, rather than in a standard job, we create the job, we do the job, we finish the job, we invoice the job. Contract jobs, on the other hand, are for longer jobs. Jobs that go over a period of time, are typically broken down into various stages, may have progress billings done against those particular jobs, and could have the concept of variations raised against those jobs if we have to change what was originally agreed on moving forward. So that's really the primary difference between a contract job and a real job. Why would we use it? Primarily we use contract jobs to manage costs, to know where the project, it's cost management. It's not project management, it's cost management. We put in our budgets, we put in our estimates, we can see where we're at of actual versus budget and estimates. We can see clearly when we have overruns, underruns, and that sort of thing, and do something about it at the point at which the problems are starting to occur, not wait to the very end of the project and then see whether we made any money or not. So that's primarily the purpose of a contract job. An example of a contract job, well, I'll open up contract jobs and show you an example, would be typically in our target markets would be air conditioning. If you do commercial air conditioning and you're putting in a very large air conditioning system into a building, you would have various stages that it has to go through. If you were, for example, building an office, you would have, here's an example of building an office. You know, you'd have preliminaries, which are things you have to do up front. You have direct wages, then you have some demolition of existing walls. You may have some concrete work, you may need to put up some metal work, masonry, do carpentry, put in gyprocs, doors and windows, roofing, plumbing, electrical, that sort of a thing. Each of those are stages that are broken down. They're typically done by different contractors. They're typically quoted for separately. The costs need to be tracked independently, but they all add up together to be an overall project that needs to be managed cost-wise. So what we're going to do is, so there are some standard stages for installation works that our clients go through. Okay, this one is for building, but for example, for air conditioning, you may have rough-ins, you may have fit-outs, you may have all different stages. So when we get into it, we really should start to be talking the language of the different industries. And this is one of the areas where the language becomes important, that we work out what the standard stages are per industry we're dealing with and talk their language when we go and talk to them. There's no point in bringing this example of stages together if we're talking to an electrical contractor. You know, they just don't relate, sort of a thing. So we need to learn the stages. There is another concept so the two concepts you really need to know about on top of this are that of variations. So a variation is the ability to add extras or change parts of this contract outside of the agreed quoted amount. Typically variations are created unapproved. They need to then be approved, and then they will update the value of the contract job. So I can show you variations, and that's a term you need to be aware of because that's industry jargon. The other term you need to be aware of is retention. Retention is when we hold back a part of an invoice, or the customer holds back a part of an invoice to be paid at some point in the future. Whether that's a certain amount of time after the invoice was raised, or whether that's after completion of the job itself. And there are various industries that do have retention. So if I raise a $1,000 invoice, they would typically retain 10% of that invoice. So they'll end up paying $900, and that 10% needs to be accounted for. That $100 needs to be at some point then re-invoiced separately to be paid. Okay? So that's the concept of retention. So what I'm going to do is to create a little contract job for you from scratch with costings and all that sort of thing. So we're going to create a new contract job. It's for somebody, whoever it's for. So I've created my contract job. On my job logging page, it looks kind of similar but a little bit different to standard jobs. So let's just say this is an office fit out, which is great. We'll put that in there. And we can say, is there retention involved in this fit out? We say, yes, there is retention. It won't include any variations, but we will retain, let's say, 10% of the contract value for 365 days to a maximum of 5% of the contract. So what does that mean? What that means is, and we're going to age the retention from the completion date. Okay, we could also age it from the invoice date, but we'll do it from the completion date. So what that means is, and let's not make it 365 days, let's make it 90 days, let's say. So what that means is that every invoice that I raise will have 10% taken out of it for retention, up to a maximum retention of 5% of the project value. So once I've reached 5% of the project value, there'll be no more retention coming out. And that retention is due to be paid 90 days from completion of the project, is what that says. Okay? So that's our retention handled over there. We can determine how our materials are to be charged. They can be charged by a standard price of the price list, or we can make them a flat markup percentage on cost. So you may have a contract which a building is typically that way, is they don't ever charge you off prices. They say, look, we've got a 20% margin on cost. Whatever the cost is, we'll put our margin on it, for example. So that's the materials pricing method. Our labour pricing method can be our standard labour rates. We can have a flat hourly rate regardless of labour type. We'll just agree to charge you, $70 an hour or whatever it is. Or we can do as a markup of percentage of employees' cost for labour calculation. So you can choose whichever way you want to charge the labour there. We can also decide whether this is a fixed price job or a parts and labour or time and materials type job as well. And there's different jobs, some are fixed price. If it's a fixed price, there's no sell prices on the parts, it's just a fixed price. If it's not a fixed price, then we have sell prices on the parts. So this is the default that we have in there. I probably won't go through any of the rest of it at this point in time. It's not really that important. We can have some job notes about the job. As with other jobs, we can assign people to go and do the work through the assignments module, but really the bulk of what occurs in the budget tab over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and add 3 stages to this particular job. So what would you typically do in an office fit out? Well, typically we would do some demolition of existing walls. No, let's assume there's none of that. We would build walls, we would do electrical work, and we would paint. Probably 3 things that we would do when we do an office fit out. So let's go and create that. So we're going to go add in a stage. And stage 1 is going to be build walls. And stage 2 is going to be electrical works. And stage 3 will be painting. So what you'll see now is that we now have created 3 stages against our job. There is no information about those yet, but we'll come back to this and show you how that gets updated. So what we're going to do is we're now going to drill into each of those stages and go and set up what we call cost centres against those stages. So we'll take our first stage 1 and we will go in and we will add in some cost centres. So one cost centre might be, I better just add one more cost centre in. Should have two. Okay, so first cost center will be materials. So for building the walls, we've got gyprock, we've got studs, we've got various other things that we need. This is not an estimating program, so we're not concerned here working out what it's going to cost. That's done separately. Purely we're putting in here the estimated costs once we know them. So let's just say that our estimated costs are $1,000, and we would have, for example, maybe a 30% markup on that. So we'd sell that for $1,300, let's say. We'll save that. We may also have a labour component involved with building those walls. So we'll choose labour, and we may have, let's say, $500 worth of labour in there, and we'll sell that just for $1,000 because we make our money on marking up the labour more than the materials, let's just say. So that's our labour. So that's our cost centres for stage 1. We can now move on to stage 2, which is electrical works. So we may have materials of $500, which we'll sell for a 20% markup, and we may have some labour once again. That's going to cost us $350, and we may just on-sell that for $500. And finally, we can move on to our painting, which is going to have a cost centre of paint materials of $200 worth of paint. We'll sell that for $300. Oops, $3,000. $300. And we may have a labour component of, let's say, $250, and we'll sell that for $375. So what we've done now is we've gone and put all our cost centres against our stages. And that's starting to build up a picture here. So we now have quoted prices against each of these stages of $2,300, $1,100 and $675. No variations at this point. So our total budget is the same figures there. Our original price was $2,300, so it's important to know where we came from. That never changes. And we have pretty much not a lot more. We have nothing billed so far. We have estimated costs in here of $1,500 and so on. We have original costs. We have no commitments. We have no cost to date. We have no anything, but our cost to complete, which is how much it's going to cost us to get to the end, is going to be the same as our estimated costs over here. So just because we've got no costs on this job does not mean that we have made profit. Okay? Because there are costs to come in the future. The costings come at a different timing to our billing cycle. Okay? So the cost to complete is a very important figure to understand, because regardless, if I invoice them right now and then the job's coming in at the moment at $4,075. If I invoice them right now, you might say, well, we've made $4,075 profit because we've not incurred any costs. But that's not the case. We have to take into account the cost to complete in order to work out the profitability of this particular job. So what I'm going to do now is I'm now going to go and start to record some costs against this particular project as we go ahead. So let's say they've started building the walls, and we're going to start to add some costings against this, some actual costs against this stage. So costs are parts and time. That's what costs are made out of, parts and time. So I can go and add a part to this job. So whatever, I don't care. I'll make it a test. Okay, so we've got a test, which is fine. And what we're going to do is we're going to use 5 of these, and it's going to cost us, let's say, $50 a piece, something like that. And we're going to save that. Now remember, this was a fixed price job, so there's no sell prices involved with adding the parts because it's a fixed price job. But we are accumulating the costings. We may have some labour involved. We may have, let's say, 8 hours of work at standard rates. No, I won't make it 8, that'll make it too much. I'll say 2 hours of work at standard rates. For somebody, for Adam. So I've now got some time, we've got some parts. If I look at my stage, you can see I was quoted $2,300. My budgeted cost was $1,500. My estimates for $1,500. I now got $350 of actual cost against this particular stage, which was my materials and my labour added together. That's where I'm up to so far, which is great. I should probably turn on the option to auto calculate percentage complete. Let me just quickly go and turn that on. And you can see I'm now 23.33% through this job. This has nothing to do with time. It's got to do with percentage of actual cost versus estimated cost, not 50% completed or 100% completed or anything like that. So that's fine there. Now I could adjust that, because what I'm going to do is when I do my billing, but let's just say we bill based on percentage complete to date. So we'll exit out of there.
You need actual time, right? Based on
I may want to bill 50% of the job, even though I've only got 25% of the cost so far. And we could probably do that actually. I'm just going to turn off the auto count. Now I remember why it wasn't turned on. So if I go back into that stage, and I'm going to set that as, let's say, 40% complete. I come back to my summary up here. So what you can see is I'm now 40% complete. 2,300, 2,300, it's all the same. Costs, estimated costs. I've now got some actual cost to date here, which is 15% of the sell price or 23% of the cost price. I still have $1,150 cost to complete. Because it's not finished yet, I've got no overruns or underruns or anything at this point in time. So now what we want to do is we want to go and send a progress claim to the customer. Oh, no, I didn't mean to exit out of that. So I can go and print out a progress claim, for example. Certain industries use progress claims. Oh, ignore that, I didn't put a date in there. Other industries don't use progress claims. So what this progress claim, if I use, is saying is that this is what I contracted, this is what's completed, this is how much you owe me down here. Thanks very much. Okay, and that's my very simple progress claim. From here, I can then go and now raise an invoice to the customer, and that's going to invoice my 40% that I put in there. Okay, so whatever percentage I put, and that's comprising only of stage 1. Let's go and put some costs in against stage 2 as well while we're at it. Don't really care. And this is going to be 1, and it's cost me, let's say, $400. Okay, so we can come back here and see that we now have cost to date of $400 against stage 1, 47% and so on, and I probably should also go and set my completion percentage against stage 2, We'll make that 25% complete. So let's go and raise an invoice. So what you'll see now is we have $1,195 invoice amount calculated. Our current value is $4,075, and nothing else has happened so far. Of my $1,195, that comes from $920 against stage 1 and $275 against stage 2. And on top of that $1,195, we've retained 10% for 90 days, which is $119.50, giving us a grand total of $1,075.50, which will actually end up being invoiced to the customer. We can go and create that invoice. So there's our invoice right there. And that's our summary of what the breakdown was against that particular invoice. If we go back to our budget summary up here again, you will now see that we now have a total dollar value billed added into the summary, and pretty much everything else is exactly the same as we had before. And so we continue on this vein. We do progress billings, until we pretty much build out the rest of the contract job. And then at some point in the future, I won't go through it now, we can then also come along and then invoice out our retention. But we'll keep going along here. So we're so far into this job, and as the owner, I want to say, well, where are we at with this job? Well, I can kind of see this. It kind of doesn't really give me an overall picture of where we're at. It's really just more a breakdown stage by stage of what's going on. So what I can do is I come over here to my summary tab, and there's various things I can see in here. So whereas this budget was a breakdown by stage, summary tab, first line, is exactly the same information but broken down by stage and cost center. Okay, so it's more granular level of breakdown. So there's my stage 1 labour, stage 2 labour, stage 3 labour, stage 1 build walls, it's a different one, labour 1, materials, and whatever these are. Where did these come from? Not sure where they came from, but that doesn't really matter.
But it's not part of the...
Where did they come from?
Yeah.
I reckon they've come in when I added the parts. I reckon I didn't take a close look at the parts cost center, and it's got
Cost center is ProWare.
ProWare. Okay, so it auto created the cost center, so that was wrong. The parts should have been materials. And if I go into my time here, probably the same things occurred there, whereby my cost center, on the first page, where is the cost center? Here, it should have been labour, not labour 1. And probably the same for stage 2, materials. That should have been, not ProWare, that should have been materials. Just delete that one. Delete those. There's a setup option to allow it to auto create cost centers or not. Okay, so let's come back in. So let's go through here again. So this is the summary broken down by stages, but in the summary tab here we now have that same summary broken down by cost center. Stage 1, 2 and 3 for labour, stage 1, 2 and 3 for materials. The columns are exactly the same. I can see exactly where we are cost center by cost center with totals underneath. That's a detailed view, or I can look at a summary view, which really just gives me the cost centers and no stages whatsoever. So this is the flip of this, or I can go into the detail view, which breaks that down stage by stage as well. Still doesn't give me a really great overall view, except here are our big totals down here, which is great. So we kind of get some idea from there that we estimated $2,800. We've got $750 cost to date. We've now reached 27% of our cost, but we've only billed out 18% of our sell so far. We still have $2,000 left to go in terms of the project, which is great. We can then look at our job analysis view, and our job analysis view tells a nicer story. So we look at our actually, let me go and add a bit more information in before we get into that. So we need to now order some parts for this particular job. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go into orders, and we're going to go and create a new order for this job, and from whichever supplier we want to order it from. Not a great supplier, but that doesn't matter. Region. We're going to add some parts to this order. Don't really care what it is. And there's going to be $500 worth of parts ordered. Don't really care. Oh, I have to select a stage. Sorry, I'm ordering it for stage 1, building the walls. Don't really care. Okay. It's just warning me that I already have that part number on the job. That's what it's doing. Let's jump out of here, and what we'll now see is a little bit of a change. We'll now see the fact that we come across that we now have commitments. A commitment is an order for the job that has not yet come in. It's not an actual cost yet because we've not received the goods, but it's a commitment to have that cost at some point in the future. So that's what's called a commitment. Okay, so if we go back to our summary tab now, so let's go have a look how our summary tab has been affected a little bit. So our current value is $4,075 with no approved variations. We have received no payments so far. We have no supplier invoices so far. This is from a cash flow point of view we're talking about. So we're completely neutral in terms of cash flow because we've not actually received any bills. We've not actually received any money. But cash flow is different to profitability. But we'll come back and see how that changes. We've now billed $1,075. There's a balance outstanding of $1,000 that they owe us, and there's still $3,000 left to pay, and we've retained $119 so far. We budgeted $2,800. We have $500 worth of commitments. These are our actual costs to date, not cash flow. Do you understand the difference between cost and cash flow? Okay, cost is the cost of materials and labour that I've consumed. Okay, so I've used a widget, I've got that cost of that widget. That's there, that's done. Cash flow, however, is I've not received any invoices from my suppliers. I don't owe them any money. I've not received any payments from my customers, so I've not got any money. I have zero cash flow.
So in and out.
In and out. Nothing in, nothing out. So this more gives you, so as soon as I receive an invoice from my supplier, I will physically start to get cash flow out coming in here.
So like a negative.
It's money that's due. Right at this point in time, I don't owe anyone any money, and I haven't received any money from anyone else. Right? So there's no cash flow at this point in time, and it's just a figure that they like to know about. The costing on the other does affect our profitability. So our cost to complete is now $1,550. But if we add in our new commitment, because that was our original budget, we add in our new commitment, which is $500, that's now going to go up to $2,050 cost to complete. No overruns, no underruns. That's our profit so far. We've made $325 profit to date, which is what we've invoiced less what we've used so far. 30% profit, that's our budgeted profit overall, so we've got a way to go yet, and we've got some percentages and so on here. So what we'll do now is we'll go and receive a payment from our customer. So we'll go into our invoicing here and we'll go and do a cash receipt. So let's just receive the whole lot. Which is $1,075.50. We'll go and save that. Payment type, that's cash. Okay, so we received our cash receipt. What we'll now do is go and receive the goods in from the supplier. So we received our goods in from our supplier, and what we can now see is a little bit of a change in our summary. So we now see from a cash flow point of view that we received $1,075 in payments, and we haven't actually paid the supplier yet. Sorry, we haven't actually paid the supplier. Yeah, I haven't actually paid for those yet. So that's zero there.
Yeah.
Sorry, they're covered under the applied costs. Yeah. When we actually pay those supplier invoices off,
So you deduct $500.
it'll be $500 deducted, giving us a net cash position positive of $575.50.
Still in the positive.
Yeah, we still want to know whether we're ahead or behind in the bank. This is the bank, basically, and so on. But as we continue through here, you'll see that we have now no commitments, but we now have materials costs, we have a cost to complete still, and so on. So we're actually making a technical loss on the job at this point in time because our costs are greater than what we've invoiced out so far. So, and this goes on and on and on, and we continue on until we get to pretty much the end of the project. So what I can do now is I can go back into my budget and I can say, right, we've finished stage 1 now, so we can make that 100%. So we'll go back into our invoicing. We can then go raise a new invoice. Current balance value $4,075. We billed $1,075 to date with that much retention. So therefore it's that much billed. Therefore there's that much outstanding $2,880 left to bill. We've calculated now that we have an additional amount to bill on stage 1, which is 60% of stage 1 because we already billed 40%, which is that one there. We have retained 6.1%. Why is it 6.1%? Because we've exceeded 5% of the total. So it's only calculating the difference to get us up to 5% of the total. Remember, retention was 10% retained, up to 5% of the total. So we're very happy with that. We'll go and create that invoice, which is fantastic. We've built the invoice, and we keep going, and we do more work, and we invoice, and we do more work, and we invoice. And so you'll see now in our budget, we're now back into profit again because we now invoice some more. So whereas we were a loss, we're now back in profit because we've invoiced more than the costs that we have incurred so far. We can also get a financial summary in here, which tells us a different snapshot, our original value, our current value, our invoice to date, our balance to be invoiced, projected costs, $2,800 costs, budgeted actual cost $1,250, cost to complete, and these are our budgeted profits for the job. $1,275 profit. That's our original profit we budgeted. This is our current profit to date. Remember, that's a meaningless figure. That's just invoiced less costs. It doesn't mean that we don't have heaps of costs left to come. That's our future profit, so that's a more meaningful figure. We take into account what we've budgeted, and if we didn't invoice anything else, we would only be making $153 in profit on this particular job. Often, for example, companies bill early and incur costs late. And so if you know that you've already billed out 80% of your job, but you've still got 70% of your costs to incur, and if this figure is pretty low, you know you're in trouble, so to speak. And that's our expected actual profit based on what we've done so far. So now they come along and say, hey, you know what? I want more expensive paint. Don't like the paint we chose. I want more expensive paint. So what we can do is we can create a variation. Okay? So I come along here to my painting stage and I'm going to click on variations. I'm going to create a brand new variation, and let's upgrade the paint. Let's just say whatever that is. So we'll save that, and we have a cost center in there, which is materials, and that's going to cost us an extra $200 in materials, of which we'll charge that out at $275. Oops, typed in the wrong column. I have to type it in there, 275. So what we now have is an unapproved variation. So that variation is not going to appear on the reports, it's not going to affect the budget, none of those figures are going to change. But I can now present, oops, where did it go? It was on stage 3. Here, we have an unapproved variation here on stage 3 that we can then now go and print and send it out to the customer and ask them to go, or not that report layout, but we can then ask them to go and approve that variation. Once they've approved it, we can then go and approve that variation, and it now becomes financial within the system. So if we come out of here now, first of all, if I look at the stage, you can see on the stage now that I have quoted price 675, but because we've now got our variation in there, our original budget, our budgeted costs, our budgeted price, we now have our approved variations of 275 with an estimate of $200 in cost. So our total price is now $950 on an original price of whatever that was, 675. If we look at our totals up here, we can now see variations starting to appear as additional columns in there. If we go look at our summary over here, you'll start to see variations starting to populate in the relevant places where variations happen to live, and so on. So why do we have variations? Because you shouldn't just change something that's been approved. You should add a change order on the top of it. If I budgeted this for $500 and then I go and just arbitrarily decide to change it to $700, well, I lose the fact that it was originally $500. And it's important to keep your original budgets intact and add the changes on as variations later. The customer may turn around and say, I didn't approve that. Why'd you do it?
That's the variation would be the introduction of another component into the
Change order.
change order, yeah.
Change order. It may change something that's existing, or it may add on something new. Whatever it is, you always try to keep the original budget intact once it's been approved, the whole thing, and then add on change orders as we move forward. So that's what a variation is, and at the end of the day, it just affects the dollar value and the various reports that we've got in here in terms of how the project's going. That's pretty much it for contract jobs. There's not really much more for me to show you conceptually apart from what this does.
If you click on the include unbilled retention.
Yeah, in our profit to date down here, that's based on original, or if I include my unbilled retention, then that'll be based on with the retention figure in there. Sometimes I want to see what my profit is compared to what I originally quoted versus what it is now with all the sorry, I made a mistake in what I told you then. Sorry. This here is profit based on, let's say, that $900 instead of the $1,000 invoice, whereas this is profit that includes the retention based on the full $1,000. Okay? I'll say that again. Remember I had a $1,000 invoice and I took 10% out for $900?
Yeah, that's
so
right.
I've only got $900 in revenue.
That's right.
So do I want these profit calculations based on the $900, or if I include the unbilled retention based on the $1,000?
Yep, the add-on. of the-
So if we see 900 without the retention, I got 1121.25 profit. With the retention, it goes up to 1325 because that money will come in just at some point in the future. So I can choose to include or not include the unbilled retention in my profit calculations. Is what that is, and the same thing on this screen here, with or without the retention figures. Okay, so that's quite quickly contract jobs.